Are you good? A little stressed because of the traffic and situation today. Karibuni. I'm Janet Bogwa. I'm the country lead for Better for Kenya. I wear several other hats. I'm a media person. My background is in TV. I am a mother of two beautiful boys. I am the founder of Inua Data Foundation, which deals with menstrual equity and also training young advocates for equipping them with the tools for advocacy, author of My First Time, and just a passionate amplifier. I have an incredible team that I'll be introducing shortly, and we have incredible guests that I'm looking at right now. CSO space, artists, youth advocates. We're just really incredibly happy to have you. This is a very chill session. It's essentially the Generation Equality Forum kickoff party. So it's laid back, that's why the look and feel is as such. But Generation Equality Forum is still a very pivotal milestone, and so we're mixing the serious with the laid back. And Better for Kenya essentially is a platform that collaborates with influencers, whether it's macro, micro, to speak on social justice issues. This year, what's been great is also collaborating with a lot of CSOs, including some who are in the room, Equality Now, that we've been doing a series of conversations with every week for the last 8 weeks, I believe. ICRW are in here as well. And then we also have different advocates representing different CBOs and CSOs. We have Yasmin, it's superb. We have Doreen as well, who's a very outspoken youth advocate. So really today it's, like I said, it's about the journey of 26 years since Beijing. And if you look at this wall, it's a journey in pictures and quotes from 1995, which was such a pivotal moment. I think it was the largest global gathering to address gender equality. And I love asking people, where were you in 1995? And I say I was pretty young, and I think it was such an incredible moment, and yet I remember the press focusing either on Yiva Mwendo's hair. I mean, I just think there's so much more that they could have done to amplify what a powerful moment it was. Be that as it may, there was a lot of progress that came out of the Beijing Women's Conference, access to education for girls and women, leadership positions that were being filled, and yet there are still so many gaps. So why are there gaps, and what does the next 26 years and beyond look like? That's what the Generation Equality Forum is about. It's about taking stock and saying, okay, it's been 26 years since Beijing, and then why are there still, why are we still grappling with teen pregnancy, with child marriage, FGM, period poverty? Why are we still seeing that, yes, there's women in leadership, but it's still not that big a number? Where are the gaps? The one thing that we're seeing a lot more of, though, is, I think, male allyship. So shout out to the men in the room. Thank you. We're also seeing a lot more different types of people getting involved in these conversations, whether it's amazing musicians such as Mercy, whether it's youth advocates, whether it's athletes. We have some as well with us. So it's becoming a lot more inclusive. I think that's the one thing we can give kudos about. But I will not delve too much into it. I am very, very, very passionate about this conversation because I feel like I'm a product in many ways of gender equality, meaning it's the way I was raised, which I later came to realize is not the norm or is not as common. I grew up in a household where there was no definition about what I could or couldn't do, what I could or couldn't be. I was, I guess, what people call a tomboy, which I also hear is a term that people are beginning to say is problematic, but that's a whole other conversation. But I was a tomboy, and there was never a time I was told you can't wear this or you can't be an astronaut. I would wake up one day and tell my parents, I am going to be a singer. I said, okay. The next day I say, I'm going to be a pilot, but there was never any limit. And I grew up that way, went to college, pursued mass communication, came back to Kenya, and wanted to do radio or TV. And again, it was just encouraged. There was nothing like women your age can't enter media, because I was 23 at the time. And those were from my parents' mouth. And my dad especially was very big on make your money. He was always about be independent, don't rely on people. Again, at that time, I didn't really understand it. I just knew I have a strict father who wants me to pay bills, and a mom who supports that. But I entered the workplace with a very open mind until the world shows you that gender inequalities exist. You're too much of a woman to do this. You're too thin, you're too this, you're too that. So it was a bit confusing. And so coming back to years later, where I am now, I'm just very grateful that that was my inroad into life, even though there was a lot of challenges because of my gender or my tribe or my ethnicity, whatever it was. When I went to South Africa, it was my race. When I went to another setting, it was because I'm a woman. In another setting, it's because I'm this tribe. And yet I never lost those fundamentals of you can do what you want. You deserve to have the same access as anybody else, not just because you're a woman or a man. And so I wish that for everyone. And I feel really triggered when I realized that's just not the case, not just for everyone, but for a lot of people. When I share that story, people are like, oh no, I was told you can't do engineering, can't do law. Who? You will not even go to school. That's the reality. And so that's what we need to reflect on. And so we have one or two speakers who will just touch on commitments around the Generation Equality Forum, who will just touch on the power of advocacy and a few other touch points, brief comments and brief speeches. It'll also be interactive if people want to have a conversation. And then it's important that we start with us, right? So when you write your name on something and you write your commitment, it sticks and you have to follow through. So a few of us have already done that. Generation equality starts with me ending period poverty, evaluating equal paying field, collecting the right data, justice for women and girls, etc. So please, before you go, make sure you leave your mark on that wall, because then you can carry that with you in everything you do. And these conversations on gender equality are not supposed to be us versus them. They're not even supposed to be technical and academic. It's just reality. And people's lives and access to opportunities relies on us pushing for equality. Yesterday, I had an in-person moment with the ICT Cabinet Secretary, Joe Mushere, and we had this whole conversation about equity versus equality. And I know that's another conversation to be had, but you know what? At the end of the day, there's just not a lot of people who could have made it to this room. We're lucky that we're here, which means we have some kind of platform and privilege in a way. So let's share that. Let's extend that where we can, whether it's with what we say or what we do. And I hope everyone can leave the room feeling that way. So before I hand it over to Josephine, I'd like to call Ashley, Josephine, Joanne, Bev to the front just so that they can wave and you can meet them. You should see how they're trying to duck. Josephine is the one who put this incredible event together, so. So Josephine is, we have a gender equality project and a family planning project, and she leads on gender equality. Like I said, this is her brainchild coming to life. She is very visual, artistic, and kind of thinks through everything. So this room, this experience you're seeing is her. So, and then we have Bev. Bev and Dam is not with us, she's in the UK. They run our social media, our digital space, and also some of our policy conversations. We have Joanne, who leads in the family planning department of Better for Kenya. So everything to do with reproductive health, conversations on the same. In fact, there's one that she's going to be having this weekend with a group of male influencers and CSOs on, I believe, the role of men. I might massacre it. She's like, no, Janet, that's not what it is. The role of men in addressing family planning. And Ashley has come in to essentially help us with the Road Towards Generation Equality Forum and lead in that front. So let's just appreciate them because they're an incredible team and they work so hard. And at some point they'll speak. Right now they're just like, no, Janet. Soon. So like I said, I didn't want to thank you guys so much. So our first speaker, because like I said, we'll have about 2-3 speakers who will touch briefly on different thematic areas on generation equality before we go into more videos and commitments and just the kickoff party that this is meant to be, is Dr. Miriam Sidibe. She'll speak first because we also appreciate that she has calls after this, so we also want to appreciate that. But Dr. Miriam Sidibe, and I'm sure she'll add more, she wears a lot of hats. She is one of the smartest people you'll meet. She's the co-founder of Global Hand Washing Day, and essentially one of the people who made so many people in the world aware of the importance of hand washing with soap. Little did we know when people are like, because I joined Lifebuoy with Miriam, and people would ask me, okay, washing hands, but we do it all the time. Why? I know Mercy is like, why? And we knew, and I learned from her about how diseases are passed on from dirty hands. And people would trivialize it and say, aye, Janet, surely washing hands. Then COVID came. And so she also was introduced by the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, of the woman who has a PhD in hand washing. I don't know if you guys remember her. She was introduced in front of the country and said a few words and trended because of that. People are like, wow, a PhD in hand washing. But she's taken that message around the world. She's written a book. She talks a lot about social mission and doing good as a company, but also doing good for the community, right? So she's very big on that, but I don't want to go on and on. I think she can touch on it and touch on the theme of building back better, which is another statement that's used quite a lot. So Dr. Professor Miriam Karibu, let's welcome her.
Thank you so much, Janet. It's such a pleasure always to be introduced by you, and always I'm never going to run away from this title of a PhD in hand washing. And talking about equality, who would have thought that a PhD in hand washing will become probably the most important topic in the world of our generation, at least, right? So I'm going to talk about a couple of things, and very much as as an African woman, of course. I'm originally from Mali. I have settled in Kenya for the last 10 years. But Kenya is very much home, and but Africa is obviously my continent. So I think globally it's very, very clear that governments are seeking to achieve gender equality and gender equity, if we can call it that way. But no country has gotten there, right? I mean, if we look at where women working in the Kenya formal sector, they earn still 32% less than men. Gender pay gap still persists globally, and that's not just Kenya. Obviously, that's almost everywhere. All of us that have been in the professional sector will tell you the difference of pay and the difference of treatment that you feel as a woman professional. But my area of expertise and my area, my passion, I suppose, is health and well-being. And what I'm going to talk to you about is basically the role that health and well-being plays in making sure that we never get to gender equality when it comes to the women and girls bearing the most of what we talk about when we talk about health and well-being. And I'm also going to talk to you about the role and the fact that gender equality needs to be everyone's business. Because I spent 15 years of my professional life working with brands and private sector, and Unilever being the biggest company that I worked in, to try to encourage the private sector to think about social issues, mainly around health and well-being. But it almost always came back to the fact that girls and women are at the forefront of needing these business models to be a lot more inclusive. For me, it's very simple. You still think about who goes hungry every night. 60% of the people that still go hungry every night are women. 80% of girls are expressing body dissatisfaction, leading to low self-esteem, leading to depression, leading to substance abuse. We're thinking about toxic masculinity and unhealthy stereotypes that are leading men to actually cause suicide as well, and also really thinking about how they don't fit in this society anymore, where they don't find their roles, right? And what does that mean in terms of domestic violence? But I think for me, it just basically shows that gender equality represents the biggest hurdle when it comes to development. And as one of the SDGs, achieving gender equality is linked to all the other goals, right? So it is better both for Kenya, but it's also a social economic opportunity for stakeholders, including businesses. But the big question for me is not whether we can change that, but what needs to be changed for us to deliver on this promise. And today what I'm going to talk to you about is what companies and brands and businesses can do to really offer these unique opportunities to change and shape and influence gender norms across their value chain. And also by helping engage men as allies, by mobilizing the media as supporters and helping dismantle, for public health, costly stereotypes. Brands can accelerate progress and close the gender gap. So what I want to talk to you about today is examples of beer brands or examples of brands around the world, one of them being a beer brand, that's helping, for example, tackle domestic violence. A laundry brand that's helping raise awareness on gender inequality in the household and getting more men to share the load. How a personal care brand is advocating for paternal paternity leave. The time for business is to act now, as COVID-19 has really showed us the difference between genders. In Kenya alone, and I think this report just came out a couple of days ago, and I saw our president talk about this, talking about 375,000 learners not going back to school due to a lack of financial resources. 250,000 of those were girls. 160,000 girls aged 15 to 19 were married off between June 2020 and February 2021. I have a teenager. My daughter is 17 years old. She just couldn't sleep that night when she heard that. This is the time when you're thinking about what you're going to be in life. This is the time where a mistake should not define the rest of your life. And it just basically symbolizes the social economic losses that the country is incurring when gender equality is unattained. And companies should support the public sector in reaching equality because it is in the interest of everyone due to the effect that this has, obviously, in our GDP, in the corporate profitability, and of course on the impact on social economic discrimination issues. Gender equality matters for me for many reasons, very, very early on. I'm also coming from a family with strong female role model, very strong male role model as well. I was named after Miriam Makeba, South African, you all know who Miriam Makeba is. She was fighting against apartheid within a society that had neither achieved racial nor gender equality. She was actually exiled in Guinea, where my mom is from, Guinea-Conakry. And my mom, as a young girl, used to sit there and watch Miriam Makeba perform and practice out of her country because she couldn't go back. And she said, one day when I have a girl, I'm going to call her Miriam. Little did she know that this young girl from Mali, which I was, at 14, I gave my first speech at the UN General Assembly. Guess what that speech was on? And I didn't speak English. I had just moved from Kinshasa to New York. Could hardly speak English, but I was chosen amongst thousands of girls to give a speech. Guess what that speech was? This was in 1991. I gave my first speech at the UN General Assembly in front of head of states, talking about women's rights and equality. So even in my broken English at that time, I wanted to share my anger towards the fact that there was such a disparity on the way we were being treated. How my brother's expectations were very different than mine. That however my achievements were, I was still the daughter of, I would still be the wife of, I better be at least the wife of somebody. Well, which meant I never took anybody's last name because I didn't want to be the wife of anybody because I didn't know how long I'd stay there anyway. The use for me, so I ended up joining and going to great school, great universities, and I thank my parents for that. Always defying a lot of the rules, that I was set to do or to be. And I started my career working in a refugee camp in Burundi, in an American NGOs. And I started realizing that we were spending a lot of time thinking about these women and girls that were internally displaced and these beneficiaries, right? These beneficiaries where we were spending all our time thinking about what kind of solutions we needed to them, what kind of toilets we wanted to bring for them, what kind of hand washing facilities. And we'd build all those toilets and these beneficiaries would spend no time and they wouldn't even want to use them. And I realized there was something fundamentally wrong with the way the donor society and the aid society was actually framed. That, thinking about this poor African woman in a rural village in Burundi with no means might not be the best way to do that. So I went back to school, got a doctorate in public health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I joined the private sector, working for Unilever. And I fell in love, completely fell in love with a word. And that word was actually consumer, believe it or not. All of a sudden I realized that that same African woman in a rural village somewhere was being respected and given dignity because even if she had 5 Kenya shilling in her pocket, that 5 Kenyan shilling meant that she could choose which bar of soap she would buy, what fragrance she might want to wash herself with. So, and then I started realizing that so many of your dreams are obviously made in your ability to have money in your pockets and in your wallet, right? And that the word consumer wasn't as bad, actually, as the word beneficiaries. And that there was something absolutely fantastic with the word consumer. So as a young girl coming out of university, determined to have a different path from her parents who were in the UN and saying, this is what I'm going to change the world. So I spent 15 years in this amazing company, great ethics, spent a lot of time, driving the soap business across the world, practiced everything I had learned around hand washing with soap, and realized, obviously, the limitations of the word consumer. Because actually, consumer, when it gets to a certain point, does not include, that rural woman. That there is a certain element in which the product innovation will stop at where whoever has a little bit of money in the pocket. So my biggest mission in life has been on transforming our business models to make sure that we make them a lot more inclusive. And keeping in mind, obviously, the most vulnerables and thinking about how you can do that. So for me, very simply, when I think about my career and where I've come from Mali, having lived all around the world, mostly in African countries, and going from NGOs, academics, to now private sector for the last 20 years, one thing that's absolutely certain to me, business marketing outperforms public charity. And business can be a real force when it comes to accelerating social change. And they have a real role in terms of driving the partnerships and the norms that we're going to need in order to advance gender equality, both within their operations, but also through actions within their value chain. And this area of power that I really wanted to talk about is obviously changing the gender narratives. And at the heart of this is obviously men as allies. And business can deliver this systemic change by changing the social norms at the workplace. And that's something I want to talk to you about. So, realizing what businesses could pioneer and operationalize this new way of addressing social justice through its work, I made that my purpose. Words like movement, mission, purpose are often used in business. And I don't know how many of you got to see my book, but please get it. It's called Brands on a Mission. And it's all around examples, around health and well-being, and what brands can do to drive and bridge that divide between what they say and what they really do. And make sure that you're going beyond these very fluffy, feel-good tasks that businesses talk about, showing how businesses, and specifically marketing leaders, can deliver change by addressing the real suffering, how much good you can actually do, and how much value you can deliver. And I believe that it can literally fix some of the shittiest problems, including this persistent gender inequality. So if we go back to what I said around health and well-being being the foundation of a good society, in the sphere of gender equality, it ranges from menstrual hygiene, better nutrition, safer sex, tackling self-esteem due to body confidence. I go as far as saying that gender equality itself is a public health issue. It's a disease that has to be treated with the same level of consuming energy. That with corporations that are becoming as big as some nation states, business can and often is a force for good. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it uses words like mission or purpose to disguise and market a way to make money and not to make the transaction useful and leave depleted communities. And at the end of that, it's actually women and girls that suffer the most. So the question for me is always around how do you link those real business models with alleviating real suffering? And what can brands and marketings do to help? Especially when it comes to gender equality. Big problems require companies. But what they do require companies to do is not to sell the idea of purpose, but to deliver on purposeful solutions. To think about real issues that really change habits and attitude at scale. That really talk, for example, about reducing the stigmas around periods or practice responsible drinking that leads to domestic violence, for example, where women are on the other end of that. But this is where, for me, Brands on a Mission, and the topic of my book and the name of my company as well, is around making sure that that interaction that you get with the consumer day in and day out can right some of this wrong and really start thinking about how you can support societal progress on gender equality. So I talk about mission. My title is a Chief Mission Officer at my company. It's a B Corp that's about advancing and accelerating health and well-being amongst brands and businesses. And I talk about mission because I believe that every product and every brand must have a reason and a raison d'être They must have a purpose. But most importantly, they must have a mission. They must have a measurable, actionable mission that creates this model that's regenerative, that leaves the consumer with more than just a feeling of belonging, but gives them more rewards, that supports the mother to be able to get her kids to wash their hands, that supports the teenage girls to feel good about her beauty, whatever her size, whatever her sexual orientation, whatever mistakes she might have done or not yet, but really understanding that full understanding. And for me, that is the heart of what I really want to talk about, and what I talk about quite a lot. It's around giving frameworks that make it more inclusive and that make it possible for some of our businesses to make gender equality a lot more inclusive. And think about what you do. What do you do with this marketing money that a beer brand is thinking about? And start thinking about, can you actually create this smart drinking squad to reduce the harmful use of alcohol? Because who gets to be at the end stick of the domestic violence? It is women and girls. So when I talk to a beer brand and I start thinking about, what can you do for smart drinking? I don't talk about it from a CSR perspective. I talk about it from a business model perspective. Because you do not want to have consumers that are beating up their wives. That is not what you want to be as a beer brand, right? And if you're talking about toxic masculinity, then you need to think about whether your advertising needs to change. And what can you do around that? What kind of partnerships can you really drive that are going to help embed these notions and help some of these businesses that spend millions of dollars on changing the paradigm and their marketing strategies to think about what they could do, right? So I talk a lot about, Durex, for example. It's a condom brand, right? But condom brands have an amazing role in societies to demystify taboos around sex for teenagers, because sometimes it's still a discussion that's very difficult for us parents to have with our teenagers. But a condom brand can have this conversation, can have the largest sex surveys to talk about, at which age did you start thinking about sex? And let's really think that whether you're abnormal, because obviously we were told that that was completely abnormal and you shouldn't think about this until you've graduated from university. How can you possibly think about that? But the reality is, if you run this larger survey, you'll realize that most teenage girls are thinking about this from 14, 15. So your daughter is not unique. She's not more interested in sex. She is normal, And what do you do? At least equip her with safe sex options. So I think for me, it's about what kind of partnership can you do, for example, with an MTV, because that's what you need to think about. What kind of advocacy can you drive that's really changing the system? I'm going to go back to Dove. Dove is one of my favorite brands. It's one of Unilever's biggest brands. And they launched a campaign for global paternity leave standards, which led Unilever to adopt a comprehensive internal policy across all its markets and make it mandatory for their men to take paternity leave as a way to be encouraged by other companies. I'm going to talk to you about Ariel. Ariel is a laundry brand that launched this hashtag share the load. That's about, tackling the inequality in the household and sharing, how actually mothers are not educating their sons to do their laundry, and then all of a sudden, a mother sees that her daughter is giving up her job because, the husband, her mother-in-law is expecting her to do laundry and she's not having time to do that. So it's about really thinking about how you change the system and which societal norms you need to carry. So it's about thinking about what you're going to measure and how you're going to measure, for example, how are we closing the gender pay gap? How are you going to align everyone towards that mission? So for me, it's about how all of us are really thinking about some of these lasting solutions that solve big problems, but whilst making money. Because I'm all about sustainable, profitable solution. And, I think for me, this is what I wanted to come to speak to you about, because obviously what you're doing today really matters, right? It's about kickstarting it. It's about celebrating the small changes that we're achieving, no matter how small they are. Because you can inspire the private sector to tackle some of these issues. You can show that it's actually possible to do so. And very simply because the private sector with their brands are critical contenders in the fight for gender equality, because they have the most important weapon of it all. they have a relationship with those consumers. Not to do for them or to take from them, but to be in a mutually beneficial relationship where we can all profit from progress. So it's our role as influencers to be able to give them ideas of what those business models can do. Because if a brand aligns with its consumer, not just to sell them something, but to join together, you can solve something. And this is how we're going to be able to solve some of the big issues out there. And move from my love for the consumers to my love to a co-creator, because that's how we all need to be. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Professor. That was incredible and relatable. You know, I hope that already in this room, you're people who are action-oriented. I think that's also why we invited you. I just hope that some of these conversations give you the validation and permission to go out there and, I guess, push back on certain discrepancies or inequalities, because I think sometimes we think it's in our mind when you see a company promoting a certain narrative, or when you hear a politician say something, or just somebody on the space come on and almost take back years of progress just by making a statement. And I'm hoping the conversations we have here today allow you to push back and say that is not progressive. And also to give recommendations and suggestions in whichever organizations you collaborate with, because that's essentially how we begin to shift things. It's uncomfortable initially, but somebody once said when many people speak up, then the bullies are silenced. And so let's not be afraid to amplify collectively. And I really love what Miriam has talked about in terms of the role of the corporate space and companies and brands in actually changing the narrative in how we see things for gender equality. So thank you. It's very refreshing and progressive. We have two more people who will be speaking to us. And yes, at some point we will be having questions and comments, as many as we can take given the time limits that we have. So note them down, share something. Like we said, you're in this room because you stand for something. What do you stand for? What do you want to share? What do you want to ask? You can take some time to put down those notes. I'd now like to invite Jean-Paul of Equality Now to talk about the power of 26, progress made thus far. So let's give him a round of applause.
I'm really honored and privileged to be speaking on this, because when we talk of the power of 26, imagine of someone who is 26 years old and what they can do. Yeah, they can do a lot. And by that time, they've made so many decisions about their lives, and they can do so much. So when we speak of 26, it is no longer a baby who is crawling, it's no longer a toddler, is a matured person who is able to do a lot in the society, in their own lives. So for today, I would like to speak on a story about a girl we call Liz. And it was really my wish that Liz could be here to speak for herself, but yeah, given the current context within which we are working, within which we're interacting, some of these movements are not very easy to arrange. But Liz is a 16-year-old and was a 16-year-old a number of years before today. And the reason why I'm speaking about Liz is because Liz just finalized her Form 4 exams, the past exams, and she did well. But Liz has a story behind her that when she was 16, she was gang raped. She was gang raped when she was coming from her grandfather's funeral. And the way it happened is that after the funeral, she decided to go home. Of course, at 16, she's strong, she's happy with life, and she says, I can walk home. I can go back to my father's house. I've buried my grandfather. Now I can go back and continue with my life. Unfortunately, on the way, she's attacked by a number of men. She's raped, and then she's thrown into a pit latrine. I know we have a number of men in the room, including myself. I would like to speak with men. I know we all know about these issues. I wouldn't wish to speak to the ladies because this is your life. This is what you experience every day. I cannot even Picture it for you. I mean, it is your life. When you enter into a matatu, when you are walking in the streets, when you go to a party, this is what's happening. So I would like to talk with my fellow men that if you are Liz's father or brother or uncle, what will you do to these guys who did this?
I mean, I think it will depend on the time that I meet these guys. If it was immediately, I think I could kill them.
Yes. Anybody else? We are very few men in the room, maybe.
I think kill, like he said. Yeah.
Thank you. So you see, we have two opinions, and you can see how they portray the magnitude and the seriousness of the issue. Now, unfortunately for Liz and for Liz's family, what happened is that these guys were told to slash the grass. Yeah, it is recorded, it is the truth. You can Google on your phone, you can search using any search engine, you'll find that these young men were told to slash, you slash the grass, and then once you're done, you go back home. Liz is still in the pit latrine, where she was thrown after being raped. And you know, of course, a pit latrine, you can't get out unless somebody assists you, because most of them, the shallow it can be is maybe 10 feet, and 10 feet, you know myself here, I'm like 5 feet, so twice me. So you can imagine how deep she was thrown. She's not dead, but she's raped. So what I'm trying to say is that when we talk of men allyship and this journey and how it comes, there are men in position. There are men in position who are able to make decisions. And if they get the right message and they understand the magnitude of the issue and they relate with it, then some of these problems we will actually be celebrating. We'll be in a party the way this is supposed to be a party. We are supposed to be celebrating with Liz now that you are done with your KCSE. What's next? But for Liz, this scar is still there. Yeah. So my name is Jean-Paul Murunga from Equality Now. And for Equality Now, we work for justice for women and girls. And that's why I wrote even there that for us it is justice. And that's why we were really interested in the case of Liz. We are working in so many countries in Africa, also in Asia, a bit of Europe, South America, and the Middle East. And a number of cases we are seeing basically portray this journey that if you reflect back in 1995, who are some of the big figures, for example, in Kenya? Some are no longer there, some are still there. And then what were they doing? The issue of gender equality. You remember at the beginning, especially during the reign of the late President Moi, there was the gender desks. But did we really understand what gender desks were, what they were doing? Remember the fight between the late President and Honorable Wangari Maathai? May her soul rest in peace. So those kind of issues, when we speak about gender equality, it is not a mystery. It is what we experience every day. And that's why I didn't want to speak to the ladies, because this is the life you experience. When you enter into a matatu and someone sits and they open their legs. When you are queuing for the matatu and someone rubs their body on your body, yeah, and they come, they orgasm. But for you, so that's why I didn't want to talk to you. I wanted to talk to my fellow men, but of course, this is some work we've been doing for quite some time. And the journey from Beijing in 1995, I was very young. I was, I think, in class 6. But I heard in the radios of Wamama wameenda Beijing. Wamama wametoka Beijing. And remember, those were the days of Moi. Wamama wametoka Beijing. I couldn't really understand. I came to understand this late in my early university years, which is over 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. Starting to now understand when they said wamama wameenda Beijing. Kwa nini wamama walikuwa wanaenda Beijing? Na wamama wametoka na nini Beijing? Of course, there was a lot of talk. But then when you look at it closely, it is the daily life issues. The food you eat, the medication you get, the water you drink. So when we look at that journey, what I can say, I know time doesn't allow, but what I can say is that as an organization, we've been part of the journey. And also as individual staff also, we've been part of the journey, but just looking at how can we support the systems that are being put in place to support this journey. Because what we all know is that normally the journey is supposed to be sweeter than even the destination. We enjoy the destination, yes, but that journey is the memorable. Like you'll say, while I was going to Mombasa, I saw this and that on the way, I saw this and that. Well, when you get to Mombasa, maybe you'll say you went to the beach. But then there's a lot of story along the way that you can carry with you as, to remember. So we are looking at things like declarations from the UN, just affirming the position of women in society. We are looking at the declaration from the African Union, just affirming the same. We are looking at the smaller units of organizations and country corporations, like even the EAC, the East African Community, the SADC, the South African Development Community, the West African ones, ECOWAS, and we've been working with all of these, but the message is the same. There's nothing, it's just those 12 commitments. Where is the water? Where is the health? Where is the security? Where is the economy, the money? And where is the knowledge, education? So it's the same thing, but then when you look at it, I would say that for now, we can say that the journey is still going on, but there are milestones we can celebrate. No one ever imagined that there will be a female president in Tanzania. I mean, people will have already talked about it, but no one will have imagined that. In Kenya, during Njonjo's time, would you have said that there will be a female chief justice, that a woman will sit on that seat? Those are some things which were not imaginable. So that's why I'm calling upon us that let us now start imagining again, 26 years from now. I don't know how old you'll be. I don't know where myself I'll be, whether I'll still be alive or dead, but imagine 26 years from now. Let's try to open our imagination so that we are able to start creating that imagination, because what draws us back sometimes is fear, and that's why we can never realize our imagination. Once you have fear, shed the fear and then just imagine it, and we work together towards it. So there are a number of things we can celebrate, like now the women in leadership, a number of policies and laws on violence against women, a number of opportunities, for example, supporting women-led organizations to be able to actualize the dream of women, of a just society, an equal society. So just looking at some of those, we have a reason to celebrate, but again, we also get strength to move on with the journey so that we don't give up and stop. Because the worst we can do is to give up and stop. And when we stop, of course, we are dead. That's the only time, you stop doing anything when now you are dead. And once you are dead, you have no use to the living world. So before we die, let's continue with this journey. Let's embrace what is happening within the journey. Let's embrace the processes, but also let's speak out. Some of these things are happening even, let's say, in our relationships, in our workplaces, in our interactions with individuals. The more we speak, and the more also, as Janet has said, that when we speak, then the bullying stops. The bullying reduces, and ultimately it will stop. So allow me to stop at that moment. There is a lot to share, but for this evening, because of time, that's what I can share for now. So thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you. When you talked about Liz's story, which I think it can trigger almost anyone, you highlighted the fact that gender-based violence has been socially normalized, which is, I think, the most frightening thing we're dealing with. I always say, if something is urgent and needs to be addressed, it will be treated as such. It will be treated like an emergency. But when there is lukewarm conversation or reaction to it, I feel like you're almost normalizing it in a way. And that's a very frightening reality for women and girls, is if you don't have leadership or family or institutions or the church completely castigating gender-based violence, that it means in some way, shape, or form, it's normal. You know, you'll still hear people saying, whether it's in areas that are maybe deeply rural or whatever it is, where somebody will tell a fellow guy, but if she's disturbing you, just, hit her. And it's a normal conversation. And we hear this from some of the men we interact with in the CSO space. They're like, these are conversations we're having even now with our relatives. You go home and it's a fight, because you're here gaining the education and empowerment. You go back to someone saying, Apana, if she's being hard-headed, do what you need to do. And so it's a good thing that the president recently committed, 2.3 billion shillings, I believe, to fighting GBV. I know we talked about it earlier. Kenya is the poster child for policies and paperwork. We were saying that with Doreen. I was on a call the other day with CSOs from different parts of the world, and they said, wow, Kenya. And yes, the paperwork is in order, but the implementation, and until we see that, until we see the GBV Survivors Fund, until we see the safe houses, how are safe houses not all over this country? How are they not there the world over? What are you trying to say? I think there's those subtle passive-aggressive messages that you're saying. If we don't have safe houses in every single county, what are we saying? So until we push for those kinds of reforms, until whatever the president committed to comes to be, you're normalizing it. And that's what's frightening. So it's good that we've seen momentum in Generation Equality Forum in this year, but the follow through, we need to really make noise, need to push for that implementation. So thank you so much, Jean-Paul, for speaking. I would like to invite our next speaker before Josephine reads a message on behalf of a woman who I believe has just, she's a pace setter in many ways. She couldn't be here, but Josephine will read a message on her behalf before we then proceed to kind of engage with each other. So without further ado, I would like to invite Crispin from ICRW. He'll talk about what ICRW is and share his short message. Let's welcome him.
Thank you so much, Janet, and everyone who has organized this. Just as for us to know and moving forward, Kenya being one of the countries that are actually, as she has rightly put it, being in the front line with regards to policies that of course address issues gender-based violence, we want to look at the part of the power of commitments. For example, in a relationship, personally, I'm married. So in a relationship like wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, when there is commitment, then you are able to invest, be it resources in terms of money, you're able to invest love, you're able to invest your time, you're able to invest your emotions and everything, and including trust. And so when that, of course, breaks at some point, you know the kind of tears that we all cry. Now, coming to the government side, I want to say that the effectiveness of a government can only be better measured by how it fulfills its commitments on behalf or to her citizens. So when I borrow from that statement, I want to look, for example, at this story that is on this wall, from 1995 to where we are today. In the year 1995, I think I was about 11 years old, just like Paul, I was in class 6. And I was in some rural place, so really I did not know about Beijing until when I came to Nairobi. And of course, did my studies in gender and public policy, then that's where I came across these conversations. But why are we here today talking about something that took place in the year 1995? And on the other side, whereas we are appreciating the kind of steps that have been taken by our government, by the CSOs, by the development partners, by us individuals, those who have chosen and deliberately decided to walk the talk with regards to gender equality issues, then we realized that there are things that we have missed in the process this far where we've come. So reflecting on the commitments that the government of Kenya has made in the recent past, which, of course, they were all over in the media from the mid-last month, May. And of the 12 commitments, if I can pick the two that Janet has alluded to, for example, the injection of 2.3 billion shillings in the fight to respond and, of course, to prevent GBV issues in Kenya, I look at the budget, which was just presented to us the other day. The year 2021-2022 budget. And in that budget, I'm still trying to establish where these 2.3 billion shillings are. Maybe the money might be in the allocations that shall be made maybe to the Department of Health or the Ministry of Health or other ministries and agencies and commissions that are responsible with regards to gender equality issues in Kenya. But why we're still trying to trace where this money is, we have about 4 years, because this is a commitment to 2026, which is 4 years from today. So what exactly are we going to do for the next 4 years that we have not necessarily done since 1995, so that then we're able to achieve a sort of an environment that is gender-friendly, an environment whereby every decision that is being made, there is a deliberate integration of gender concerns and decisions, and of course what we normally call gender smart investments across board, for us to realize that in the next 26 years, our children and the current generation and the one that will come will be able to enjoy much more than it has been. When you look at most of this, I can see the headlines there, they demonstrate a lot of gaps. The headlines, as you can see, they still demonstrating that even today, it's not easy for a woman to rise up in the public leadership ladder. It's not easy. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of advocacy. It takes a lot of mobilization. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of resources for them to be where they are. Is this going to be the trend? That for a woman to be in a certain position, she has to invest so much, including her life. She has to invest her dignity, which at times has to be undressed down, but she has to grow thick skin for her to survive through the political process. And we talk about land ownership, for example. We are talking about 1% of women in Kenya. When you look at land ownership, just 1%. And so when you look at this percentage, and what does it tell you when it comes to economic empowerment, whereby we need collaterals all over in the name of titles for you to get money or capital to inject into business? So it means we're still drawing behind. Is this a kind of a conversation that we should have in the 21st century? Of course not. And so when I look at the power of commitments, is that the commitments, and during the time the president did that through a virtual platform, everyone was celebrating, including myself. But then I take a step back and ask myself, is this just going to be on paper again? Or there will be deliberate investment, resources, financing. One of the commitments is actually to invest about $1 million. That's about 100 million shillings every year. That's annually for the next 4 years in GBV research and innovations and such a kind of things. So I also want to ask in the current budget. Of course, the commitments came the other day in May when maybe the budget for this year had already been prepared. But I would want to see that if that money wasn't allocated for, then the next immediate supplementary budget should consider those figures, and it should be deliberate for even us to know where that money lies. The CSOs, I want to applaud you so much that so much has happened, that you're the ones who have owned this space in terms of you saw the commitments from Beijing and took them up. Until now, you're branded activists. But you're not just being activists for the sake of it, but you want to highlight an issue that is becoming an impediment for our common growth as a nation. And so we want to draw back and realize that, yes, what is it that we personally, that we can do at personal levels to ensure that these commitments that our government has actually appended its signature to, and it's presenting next week at the Paris conference, that they're not just going to be on paper again and feel-good programs. For a commitment actually makes you feel good. It restores hope. It makes you think that things are going to happen. But then when it fails to happen, definitely, you know that it will be heartbreaking. And so I want to say that commitments, especially the ones that are being made by the government, actually, they make the difference between failure and success. And that comes at the point of implementation. And so when we look at the structure of the commitments made, be it, for example, adoption of the leadership framework, are there steps to exactly do that, to ensure that it's going to take place? When I look at the current situation in which we are, everyone is saying COVID has exacerbated what used to be there, and I want to agree. When you look at the statistics by the National Crimes Research Center, they will tell you that in the year 2020, last year, January to June, the GBV cases and incidences in Kenya rose 92.9% times. That's when you compare that to 2019, the same period. And this is the current time when we should not be talking about all these negative things that are happening and are drawing back the gains which actually we have already made. In which case then, these commitments as they come in, they must be able to be followed by actions. Are we together? They must be followed by actions, deliberate actions, whereby all of us will definitely have to get involved. As I almost come to a close, I want to say this, that in the recent study that we did as ICRW is an organization, it's actually a hub of research based in the US, in Asia, and also in Africa, here in Nairobi. And among our areas of interest is this space of gender, women economic empowerment, GBV, as you could call it, and SRH, all those kind of programs, so that then we're able to respond to the full and whole being of these women, men, youth, and all these people. Now, when we look at, for example, picking one of the studies we did on women in manufacturing, it was first of its own kind study, together with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. What we were doing is try to see if, for example, in non-traditional sectors, because we're trying to encourage women and young ladies to engage in STEM courses and pursue non-traditional sectors in terms of employment that will be sustainable. When we look at that study, the other day we had a webinar on Tuesday, and the Engineers Board of Kenya said that out of the 20,000 engineers registered, only 8% are women. Which percentage did I say? 8%. That's about 1,600 engineers. Now, what does that tell us when we still saying that, yes, with this kind of, for example, areas of study, then we're going to have as many as women enabled to actually earn decent incomes from sustainable means of, sustainable businesses. So it tells us there's a gap somewhere. And those are the gaps that are, as Janet said earlier, the cultural issues. If your family was a family that did not believe in the education of the girl child, this challenge is going to persist. If you are lucky to be in a family whereby the father and the mother believes that for sure you need equal opportunities as your brother, then definitely you are likely to make it. Now, we as Generation Equality, us to whom this conversation is happening, we need now then to have a total mind shift from just wishful thinking to masterful thinking, whereby the things that we're talking about must be done. The commitments that have been made must be fulfilled. And so then when we come to commemorate, for example, another year, another 5 years, 10 years, another 26 years, we will not be talking about barriers and gaps and the gray areas, but we'll be talking about having fulfilled this, and so it becomes even an investment in itself. And the first speaker, the professor, mentioned something about all these things making economic sense. I'll tell you that GBV itself, it has been costed in Kenya, that GBV, in terms of productivity cost, GBV costs us about 46 billion shillings annually. You're looking at a woman who has suffered in the hands of a husband or a brother or family, a woman who's also being harassed at the workplace. This woman, she's not going to be productive at the workplace. She's not going to be productive even to herself. She's not even going to be productive at the home setting. And so you're affecting a whole line, a whole value chain, if I can call it, by you distracting and, of course, making sure that this woman is not able to progress. Now, when you look at that value of 46 billion annually lost due to GBV, then you want to ask yourself, should we continue like that? Or we should do something to be able to change that environment and make it conducive for this woman. So when we make it conducive, we are looking at making this woman productive, you making this woman to perform better, but also increasing profits in those companies. And at the end of the day, when companies make profit, the nation makes profit through taxes, and of course, development is achieved. So when we learn to look at these things in terms of in the intersectionality, but also broadly, then we recognize that this is the time that this theme, there have been many themes since 1995. Every time there is a conference, there is a theme. There is actually a clarion call. May it be that now, as we're talking about generation equality now, moving forward, we'll be able to have themes that demonstrate what we have achieved, what we are achieving, how we are achieving, and how we are making sure that these commitments are realized. Lastly, when we're talking about one of the other commitments, it's about ensuring that the policies, the GPV policies, are actually implemented. I want to say this. Someone told me that you cannot legislate attitude. Are we together? You cannot legislate what? Attitude. And so if there are communities in Kenya whereby, for example, FGM is being practiced at such a time as this, because, you know, statistics still show from the guys in Northeastern, go down to Kisii County and other counties, still the prevalence is too high. Go back to Kajiado, Narok, is still too high. The other day I was in Kirinyaga, and this is a mother of 3 children, and the husband knows that the wife wasn't cut. And so anytime the wife tries to mess up a few things the way he thinks, he threatens her that I'll tell your people and my community that you're not cut. Because in that setup, if you're not cut, you're likely to be cut, even if you're a mother. Are we together? And so this is happening now, right here across Kirinyaga. And so I'm saying that when we look at legislation and policy, we want to see how do we communicate with the people out there so that it's not about a national level and account level thing, but also looking at us, the consumers of these policies. So that then it's not just all about punishment, but also correction and engaging people to change attitude, because you cannot legislate attitude. Because those attitudes sort of make us have what we can call unconscious biases that make us, for example, if you have that unconscious bias of the position of a woman being subjugated, even when you go to the workplace, you are likely even to transfer that to the workplace. And so things that we have socially accepted for far too long, it's time we dropped them as a nation, as private sector, as the CSOs, as the government, and ensure that together we push the government until all the 12 commitments and many more that might come in between are fulfilled through a framework that we all understand, that we are all onboarded, that we are all engaged, that everyone is doing their part. For me and for my organization, we are saying generation equality starts with me now, not another time. Thank you so much.
Like we said, you're all in this room because you take action in one way or another. And so this is not about imparting knowledge, it's about sharing experiences, etc. So there is a letter that is going to be read by Josephine, who leads the Gender Equality Department of Better for Kenya, about a lady who, I'm looking at Pat. You know Pat, is Pat looking behind? Pat Okello is here. I admire her greatly, so it's really good to see you. I didn't realize it was you till I saw you remove the mask. She's done a lot for women in entrepreneurship, and the lady who we're going to hear about is Pat's mom-in-law, who I guess you're all just kind of pace setters in your own way, but I'll just literally read a paragraph about her as Josephine makes her way forward. But she pursued a successful career as an executive of Barclays Bank in Kenya before founding the only women's bank in Africa and the Makini school system. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Mary Okello, anyone, but she is essentially an iconic trendsetter. In fact, she talks about how she was labeled a troublemaker. You know, sometimes you just have to disrupt. It's uncomfortable, but look at what it results in. Right? I can actually see some disruptors here when I look at Yasmin and Doreen. So it's important. It's important. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes you're labeled. Sometimes you feel out of place. But if it's something that's burning in you and you feel like it's a necessary shift, then be the troublemaker. I think what we need to do is create safe spaces for troublemakers so that they don't feel isolated. So Josephine wanted to read a message on behalf of her before we wind up. Karibu.
In our society, the women who break down barriers are those who ignore limits. Since the UN meeting in 1975 in Mexico, a lot of progress has been made on women equality, but a lot remains to be achieved. We look up to a young generation, to you, to close the gap. My generation have played their part. For example, when I, Mary Okello, was appointed the first woman bank manager in Kenya. Prior to that, women in banking were clerks, cashiers, secretaries, and tea girls. But today, there are many women managers and even women members of bank boards. Together with some Kenyan women, I started the Kenya Women Finance Trust to train women in banking and to access financial services. I was also instrumental in starting similar organizations in other countries, which have greatly empowered women financially and given them access to credit. Women had no access to financial services because of the discriminatory laws in financial institutions. We lobbied the government, they formed a task force, I chaired the economic committee, and through the task force, all the discriminatory laws and policies were removed. Today, women have equal access to financial services like men. These are just two examples of what my generation has done to move women forward. There are still glaring gaps in some thematic areas raised 26 years ago. What are the young generation doing? What are you doing to close the inequality gap? Women economics empowerment is not complete. We need to invest in women, and women need to own big capital and corporation. I will challenge you, the young generation, to come up with strategies to achieve that. 26 years is too long a time to wait for change to happen. Gender equality cannot wait. You are the change we have been waiting for. Hashtag Jitokeze.
Thank you so much, Josephine. And I know she's also somebody who means a lot to you. I'm just curious, as we wind up, any initial reactions we can have? Give 3 or 4 of you an opportunity to just share something. And on top of that, we keep hearing this statement of young people, it's your time, young people, it's your time. And then sometimes I feel like young people push back and say, but you're not giving us the seat at the table. And yet, again, when I was speaking to CS Joe Musheru, he was saying, you know, I feel like now we've created opportunities and platforms. He was saying, we've created the National Youth Council. We have a few chief administrative secretaries who are 35 and below. Some of them are 30 and below. So he was saying, okay, so then what more do you want? What we've created, we sit around the table and we hear that young people are saying, we want to be involved. So we involve them. Then they come and sit at the table and we ask them, what do you want? Then they say, we want to be involved. But they're like, he's like, but you're here. So I'm curious, because I know there's 1 or 2 youth advocates in the room, if I can give you a chance to briefly say, do you feel involved? Do you feel mainstreamed? Do you feel like, okay, I've taken the baton and I'm running with it for the next 26 years? Just briefly, if you can just comment on that. I'll just point you out if you don't put up your hand. It's this corner. Yasmin.
So I'm Yasmin Mohammed from Kibra. I'm a menstrual champion. And mine is a comment because the conversation is not like being domesticated at marginalized and or rather informal setups. So our organization is there to ensure that the conversation has been accelerated at grassroots level and also engage the girls and women themselves because they understand their problems and they're the ones who like will sort of come up with solutions on like what do they think are some of the solutions that we can come up with to ensure that some of these challenges, like we are able to curb the challenges that they are going through. And also in terms of policy, I'm glad to be like sitting in the Nairobi Technical Working Group, Nairobi County, like formulating youth policies. But me, my agenda there is female youth. What are they doing to ensure that us female youth like sit in the table and formulate policies that are friendly to us because women, we are marginalized, we are vulnerable in so many ways and we are there to ensure that not only me, Yasmin, but also other girls from informal setups get such opportunities to sit in policy-making tables. So having said that, looking forward to engage more with Better for Kenya and to continue the conversation at grassroots level. Thank you.
Good evening. It's already 5, I think. Well, I'm humbled to be here this evening. And I just want to share a bit of my journey and what I'm doing or what I'm looking to see happen in the near future. Well, I come from a footballing background. I'm a former football player. I played professional, even in Germany. But my journey was short-lived. I incurred an injury, and again, it was a struggle to even reach to that level because there were minimal opportunities for girls. And I know maybe some of you will be shocked to hear that, okay, a Kenyan playing professional in Europe, a woman for that matter, it's unheard of. But it's been a challenge, a huge challenge, especially growing up. I started playing football when I was 8 years. But I had to struggle because, first of all, my own family didn't allow me to play, but my brothers would go and play. So I had to struggle to convince my parents that I am also talented and I can also do this. so that they would let me and allow me to go out and play. So later on that worked, but again, within the community, a woman or a girl playing football was always associated with vices. So if you hear so and so's daughter is playing football, then that's bad news. That is not a girl I'd want my daughter to hang around. So I had to fight that a lot and to show people that it is a sport just like any other sport. It is a career path I can choose and follow and excel in it. So all I need is support from my family, from my peers, and also from the community. So today, after retiring from playing, I ventured into administration. And my biggest goal and dream is to see that girls get an equal playing field, regardless of how old you are or where you're coming from, and that you get supported and treated just like your brother or your neighbor's son. And that it is a career path that one can follow, just like in tennis or basketball or swimming. We can support our daughters, our sisters, to ensure that they reach their dream and their goals. And again, we were discussing earlier about the gap in remuneration, for example, or even payment. Women play only for fun or passion. There's nothing they gain out of it, whereas men play and they earn from it. So this is a gap that in the near future we would like to see closed, and so that if I go out playing football, I can equally make as much as my brother makes on the same field. So it is a collective responsibility, and I'm glad to be here, and we've been working already this journey with Better for Kenya, and I'm just hoping that the conversations can go on so that we can already find this level, this playing field, and ensure that girls from wherever you are across the whole country get the opportunity to play and enjoy the sport just like their brothers and the male counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that inclusive aspect of sport, because it's a tool for so many things. And like you said, it shouldn't just be for fun. Impact is important, but also earning is important. Thank you, Doreen. I think we can invite you finally, Doreen, especially in the aspect of, you know, we shared a stage with you recently at the UN Women event. And even now, you were saying there's an implementation gap. There's something that needs to happen. I'm curious to know whether, because you here also have quote unquote, a seat at the table. Is it enough? Do you think enough is being done? Do you think youth voices are being mainstreamed enough, or where are the gaps?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Doreen, and I'm part of the Global Generation Equality Youth Task Force. And yes, we have been given a seat. And in 2019, UN Women decided to form a global youth task force to bring together the youth voices from the grassroots level so that they can be heard, because all of us come from different countries, but from grassroots organizations. But we have pushed, because there were already CSOs working with young people. You know, there is calling young people, as Janet has said, you call young people, they are at the table. But they come, the report reads, there were young people. But what did the young people say? Did you listen to what they asked for? Did you include that young people need this, young people need that? Was that included there? Saying there were young people is one thing. Saying including what they said is another thing. So sometimes young people are accused of not actually saying what they want. They're at the table, but they don't say what they want. So us, as the Global Youth Task Force, we have really pushed a lot of things, including working with the private sector. At some point, we had some really major fights going on, but we actually finally got that seat. There is the core group of the UN Women. Also, we were not part of that. Actually, young people were not part of that, but we pushed to be part of that because we wanted them, as they're making decisions as governments, we also want to be there. We want to tell them this is what young people want. This is what young people from the grassroots want. Because at the end of the day, our voices need to be heard. And we have worked with them since 2019. for free. It's like a full-time job. They want us every other meeting, and we tell them, you're engaging us. Some of us don't even have jobs, but you're still engaging us, and you want us at the table, and we're making decisions, and that ends there. So we need that support from you. We are giving you what we want as young people. You are saying you're going to implement, you're going to push our governments are committing, but then again, doing all this work, because we have done a lot of work with them. We've created the Young Feminist Manifesto, and they are like, oh, we shall see what we can do. We shall see how we can engage. And they come back and say, how can we help? We say, we want you guys to at least support us, give us resources. Let us go back and do advocacy around the Generation Equality Forum, because there are people who don't know it's even happening next week. And we told them that, and they said, okay, let us consider. And the Gates Foundation gave us some small grant, but it is yet to be implemented. But we're still going to do advocacy. So I even asked Janet when we came here that, what next after Paris? We are going to Paris, yes, we are going to commit. Our president is going to go there and say, here is my signature, I'm committing to achieving gender equality and all the 12 thematic areas. But what next? Because we have come 26 years. Are we going to do another 26 years just doing the same thing and saying, young people, you need involvement? No, this is the time, this is the generation that changes that narrative. This is now how we go forward post Paris and say, we are now taking these issues to the young people direct at the grassroots level. We are going to Kibra, we are going to empower those young women, we are going to talk to them about mental health, we are going to talk to them about menstrual health, we're going to talk to them about SRHR, because those are the things that matter. Right now we have a teenage pregnancy crisis, and they're setting up a task force. That task force won't help, but they will still set it up, and budgets are going to go into that. What they need, they are not doing. They're shying away from implementing CSE in schools. They're shying away from that. They don't want that, but they still want to set up a task force. So as I am a HIV and AIDS advocate, and I say, Sub-Saharan Africa has many women living with HIV than men. Why are we not addressing this? And this is 15 to 24 years. You know, that is a generation. We need to be that generation that actually creates change and impactful change, not just change, impactful change. So that implementation, we need to push for it, Janet. But let's just commit ourselves to push for that implementation. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Pat wants to say something. Yay! We'll give Pat the final mic, and then we'll allow you to sign and engage with each other.
Yeah, good evening, actually, everybody here. I think, yeah, it's very interesting as an entrepreneur to sit and hear about policies and waiting for somebody to come and help you. I'm telling you, it's tough out there as an entrepreneur. There's no one coming to help you, man. So one of the things that I like to speak about, especially when I'm speaking to young people, is this concept of entrepreneurship, and more important, entrepreneurship, which is really driving change within the organizations in which you are positioned. It can happen in government, it can happen in NGO, it can happen in any sector, where you have an idea and you want to bring it to basically push with that idea, where you see a gap, you see a need, and you feel that you can actually fill that need. And that's really what entrepreneurs do. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about seeing young people going into business is because what I love about technology these days is that it's kind of like bridged the gap, and you can do anything, you can say that you're anything. And the beauty about this young generation is entrepreneurship has become part of their DNA. So what we do at Kayana is really just to focus on businesses that are in incubation or businesses that are pivoting and changing, and invariably we work with very, very young people. Why am I talking about this? I truly believe that economic empowerment is a weapon to fight a lot of the things that we have spoken about today. When a woman is given begins to run her own business, she grows in confidence, she takes on leadership roles, and she can eventually fight policy changes within organizations. Just like the speech that was read by my mom-in-law, well-behaved women seldom make history. Stop trying to keep the rules. You must speak up. You have to speak up like Doreen and say it as it is, and then people begin to take notice. But it's not enough to just say. Start doing, mobilizing. Don't focus on, we're told never to focus on money, even as entrepreneurs. Focus on the cause and the purpose, and the money will follow. It happens. So I just wanted to say that before you close down. Thank you very much.
We're so lucky to have Pat in the room. She's somebody who's done a lot. That economic empowerment, and I think you touched on it as well. It really is. We did a program, or Your Voice Matters, which we've been collaborating with Equality Now, and every week it's a series of conversations. And last week's was on economic empowerment and how, and because this year's focus has been on gender-based violence, especially because Kenya was chosen as one of the Action Coalition countries, the conversation became a lot about when a woman has the economic empowerment in her hand, she has the negotiating power many times. So it's not to be taken lightly. They are all interlinked, I would say. And so I think let's just not relent on these conversations. You make enough noise, people will listen. They will. I think sometimes, especially for people at the front lines, it's exhausting, it's tiring, you're broke, you're tired. Another conversation that's happening a lot now is funding women at the front lines. That's become a global conversation. You guys are like, we're the ones in the community addressing GBV and FGM and child marriage. Why are you funding each other? And so recently I was moderating a conversation that was a precursor to the G7 summit. And it was really good to hear even some of the ministers of London saying, yeah, we need to do better. So things are shifting. As Pat said, the more you do it, somehow the money follows, because you do need resources in this space. Advocacy is expensive, and yet it's the most critical tool in creating change. You have to start by amplifying, but it's expensive. The Women Development Summit that I attended in March just before lockdown in London, there was a woman who just sat at a panel. She's called Uma Mishra. She's a really big advocate, British, Indian, but has grown up in the UK, sitting on a panel of donors, and she was like, can you guys fund us? And she's the one who said we're broke and we're tired and we're fighting relentlessly. And I think it started the conversation in a big way. And now organizations the world over are starting to kind of, take stock in a way, because it's also an uncomfortable shift for many of them. But they realize, yeah, these are the people at the front lines, but you can't always be going out of pocket trying to impact change. It needs to be supported. So thank you for touching on that economic empowerment aspect. And we could stay here all day. I could talk about this all day. I'm very passionate about it. But I think we'll end it there. This was, again, just a moment to say Generation Equality Forum kicks off next week. It's 30th of June to 2nd July. It's a global moment. Kenya is kind of at the forefront, by the way. Like I say, we keep coming up. I'm actually moderating one of the global events that's happening. And so there's something special in us. I truly insist on it. I just wish the gap could be closed between, the paperwork and the ideas and the implementation. But maybe this is the time to push for it. So if you haven't already, please register for the Generation Equality Forum. And then just the amplification and advocacy. Do not relent. Let's support each other on the same. And let's hold commitments to our hearts as well. And hopefully it begins with you all, kind of talking about what you commit to do. Because sometimes you write it and you plant a seed somewhere. So with that said, I want to thank you all so much for coming, despite it being a very crazy day on the roads. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've found it fulfilling and interesting hearing from everyone who's spoken. Thank you once again to the Better for Kenya team. We really need to thank Josephine. Thank you, Josephine. Yes, again, because she put this together. Ashley, I can see she's with the Equality Now team. We are now one with Sarah. Joanne, I think she's somewhere, and of course, Bev and Dam. So thank you guys again for coming. Thank you for doing what you do, all of you in your own spaces. Even Capital FM, who are here today, they are incredible to work with. So thank you guys as well. Lukase, who has been a photographer for us, and of course, Bobo, who is the DJ today. Thank you guys. It's now time to mingle, engage, exchange numbers, network. There's a fusion here somewhere. I see it. So just make it happen. have bitings, take photos, there'll be music. Sign that, and please don't forget to sign up for the forum and to follow the conversations. And then beyond Paris, as Doreen said, what next? Let's see. Let's also start thinking about beyond Paris. So thank you guys again. Have an amazing evening.